I married into the Voss family the year I turned 29, in a garden ceremony on Sullivan's Island where the marsh grass moved like it was breathing. Mordecai Voss stood at the altar in a gray suit that fit him like it had been poured on, and I remember thinking I had never seen anyone look so certain of his own life. I was not from that world. My father, Ronan Calloway, spent 31 years as a certified public accountant in a strip mall office in North Charleston, auditing small businesses that couldn't afford anyone fancier. He kept every file in alphabetical order and every number honest. "The numbers don't lie," he used to tell me. "Only people do." When I passed my CPA exam at 24, he gave me his fountain pen, black lacquer worn thin at the cap. "Use this for the truth," he said. "Not for the easy stuff." I still have it. Mordecai was warm before he was cold. He drove 4 hours to sit with me in a hospital waiting room the night my father's heart gave out, and he didn't say a word the whole time, just held my hand until the doctor came out. That's the version of him I fell in love with. The one who knew when silence was a kindness. His mother, Betrayal Voss, never liked me. She had a way of looking at my shoes before she looked at my face, like she was pricing what I cost. Voss Global Holdings had been her husband's company before it was Mordecai's, 3 generations of shipping and logistics money, and she guarded the name the way some people guard a grave. I built my career quietly the way my father taught me. I trained as a forensic auditor, the kind of work where you spend your days finding the one number that doesn't match the other 900 of them. At 28, I started a small turnaround fund with an old friend of my father's named Evander Pierce, a retired dealmaker with kind eyes and a bad hip. We put his name on the door instead of mine, because investors listen faster to a gray-haired man in a good suit than to a woman with a spreadsheet. Callaway Meridian Capital. My name was in it. Nobody noticed. You know that feeling when you love someone enough to stop asking the questions you're afraid of the answer to. I had that feeling for 4 years. By the time our daughter Iris was born, I understood exactly how fragile Voss Global's finances actually were, though I never told Mordecai. I didn't go looking for it. It found me the way rot finds a house nobody's checked the foundation of in a long time. It was a Tuesday in March. I was folding Iris's laundry when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer that call. I wish some nights that I hadn't. It was a woman named Priscilla Nash, an old classmate from my auditing program who now worked in credit ratings. She kept her voice light the way people do when they're about to say something that isn't. "I probably shouldn't say this," she said, "but Voss Global's bond rating is under internal review. Nobody's talking about it yet. I just thought since you're family now." I told her thank you. I told myself it was nothing the way you tell yourself a check engine light is probably nothing. That Friday at Umbriel's monthly dinner, the good china came out along with a woman I hadn't met, introduced as a family friend, who had started helping with the foundation's galas. Her name was Sabrina Lockhart. She had a laugh that arrived half a second before anything funny had been said, and she touched Mordecai's forearm when she made a point, casual as breathing. "Sabrina has wonderful instincts for donor relations," Umbriel said, watching me while she said it. I noticed the touch. I noticed Mordecai didn't move his arm away. I noticed, and then I did what I had trained myself to do with numbers that didn't quite add up. I filed it. I told myself I'd come back to it later when I had more information, when I wasn't imagining things. Driscoll Hale, the company's CFO, caught me alone by the bar cart that night. He'd known my father slightly years ago through a mutual client. "How's the pen treating you?" he asked, nodding at my clutch where I'd tucked it out of habit. Then, quieter, "Tell Mordecai to get a second opinion on the Charleston port contracts. Just tell him." I asked what he meant. He said never mind and refilled his glass instead. I didn't push. I had a 2-month-old at home and a husband who still, some nights, came home early just to read to her before bed. I told myself the company's business was the company's business, and I had married a good man who happened to come from a difficult family, and difficult families said difficult things at dinner, and none of it meant what it looked like. Iris woke up crying around midnight, and Mordecai got to her first. I stood in the hallway and watched him lift her out of the crib. humming something off-key, and I thought, this is real. Whatever else is happening, this is real. I didn't call Priscilla back. I put the pen back in its drawer. I told myself I would ask questions later when I was less tired, when the timing was better. There is never a better time. I know that now. Things got better before they got worse. I need you to understand that, because it's the part people skip when they tell stories like this. For almost 2 months after that dinner, Mordecai was the man from the beginning of our marriage. He came home for dinner 4 nights a week. He took Iris to her pediatrician appointment without me asking. He found me in the kitchen one night, forensic reports for a client spread across the counter, and he made me tea without being asked and sat across from me just to keep me company while I worked. I know I haven't been around enough, he said. That's going to change. I let myself believe him. I want to be honest about that, because it would be easy now to pretend I saw everything coming, that I was some quiet genius 3 steps ahead the whole time. I wasn't. I was a tired new mother who loved her husband and wanted, more than I wanted, to be right, for things to be fine. He canceled a dinner with Sabrina's foundation committee to come to Iris's first pediatric checkup instead. He told his mother in front of me that he needed more say in his own schedule. Umbriel's mouth went thin, but she didn't argue. I started sleeping through the night again. I stopped checking my phone for Priscilla's name. You know that feeling when you've been careful for so long that letting your guard down feels less like a decision and more like relief flooding in through a door you forgot you've been holding shut. That's what those 2 months felt like. I let it in. My father used to say that trust was a ledger too, that you didn't have to distrust someone to keep good records, you just had to keep them. I stopped keeping them for a while. I stopped writing anything down. Near the end of that stretch, Mordecai brought home a small gift, wrapped badly, the way men wrap things when they've done it themselves. Inside was a leather portfolio monogrammed, meant to hold a fountain pen. For your father's pen, he said. So it's not just loose in a drawer. I cried a little, holding it. I told him thank you. I put the pen inside it that night and set it on my desk, and for the first time in 2 months I let myself think that maybe Priscilla had been wrong, that maybe Driscoll had just been an old man who drank too much at parties, that maybe Sabrina Lockhart was exactly what Umbriel said she was and nothing more. I was wrong to stop watching. I understand that now. But I don't regret believing him, not entirely, because for those 2 months, I got to have the marriage I thought I'd married into. It didn't last. It was a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays were when I did the funds books, and I was 3 hours into reconciling a client account when Winona Pierce, Evander's daughter and my attorney, called me about something unrelated to the Voss family entirely. A routine question about our fund's insurance filing. While I have you, she said, near the end of the call, did you know Voss Global filed an amended 8K last week? Your husband's company. I hadn't. I told her I'd look into it, and I did, that same afternoon, the way I looked into anything methodically, starting with public filings and working inward. What I found didn't match what I knew about the Charleston port contracts Driscoll had mentioned at dinner 2 months earlier. Revenue figures that had shifted between subsidiaries in a way that had no operational reason behind it. The kind of shift that exists on paper to hide something that doesn't exist anywhere else. I told myself there could be an explanation. There's almost always an explanation until there isn't. I called Driscoll directly, something I'd never done before. He didn't pick up. He called back 4 hours later from what sounded like a parking garage, his voice low. I shouldn't be talking to you about this, he said. But your father was a good man, and I think you should look at the Meridian Point acquisition file. Ask Mordecai where the appraisal came from. Ask him who signed off on the valuation. I asked him why he was telling me and not the board. Because I did tell the board, he said. 18 months ago. Nobody wanted to hear it. That night after Iris was asleep, I went looking. Not through anything I shouldn't have had access to. Everything I found was in files Mordecai kept in the home office, the same office where he'd read Iris her bedtime stories 100 times. In a drawer I'd never had reason to open, I found a folder of correspondence between Mordecai and a valuation firm I didn't recognize. Backdated appraisal documents for a property acquisition that had inflated Voss Global's collateral value by nearly 40%, right around the time Priscilla's bond rating review would have started. Underneath that folder was another one. Personal expense reports, routed through the foundation's donor relations budget. Sabrina Lockhart's name on nearly every line. I sat on the floor of that office for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I photographed every page with my phone methodically, the way my father taught me to document anything before you touch it, and I put the folders back exactly where I found them. I heard Mordecai's car in the driveway before I'd finished. I closed the drawer, sat down at the desk with a legal pad, and by the time he walked in I looked like a woman reviewing client work. "Long day?" he asked, kissing the top of my head. "Long day," I said. I did not tell him what I'd found that night. Some things need to sit before you know what to do with them. But I went into Iris's room before bed and stood over her crib for a long time, and I thought about my father's warning, the one he never actually gave me, because he died before Mordecai and I ever got engaged, and I wondered what he would have found in that drawer in about 4 minutes flat. I thought about the pen in its new leather case on my desk. Then I picked it up, and I started writing everything down. I want to tell you I made a plan immediately. I didn't. For 3 days I did nothing but function. Feed Iris. Answer client emails. Cook dinner. Lie next to Mordecai at night with my eyes open long after his breathing evened out. On the 4th day I called Winona Pierce and asked her to meet me somewhere that wasn't her office. We met at a diner off Highway 17, the kind of place with vinyl booths and coffee that never stops coming. I laid it out for her the way my father taught me to lay out any set of facts. Cleanly, in order, without adjectives doing work the numbers should be doing. Winona read through the photographs on my phone twice, her expression not changing until she got to the second folder, the one with Sabrina's name on it. "This is the most complete paper trail I've seen from someone who isn't a forensic team," she said. "Every date here checks against something verifiable. The valuation firm doesn't even exist as a licensed entity in this state. That alone unravels the whole appraisal." She explained it plainly the way good lawyers do. The backdated documents, if authenticated, would expose Mordecai and possibly Umbriel to securities fraud liability, separate from anything that happened in our marriage. The foundation payments to Sabrina could be structured to look like an unrelated issue, or they could be tied together depending on what I wanted. She used words like could and may. She never once told me what would happen. She only told me what was possible. "What do you want to do?" she asked. I thought about Driscoll, calling from a parking garage because the board hadn't listened 18 months earlier. I thought about my father's pen, and the fact that he'd spent 31 years making sure small businesses that couldn't afford better told the truth on paper, even when the truth cost them. "I want the truth on the record," I said. "Not revenge. The truth." Winona nodded like that was the answer she'd been hoping for. I called Evander Pierce that same night. He was quiet for a long moment on the phone, the kind of quiet that meant he was thinking, not hesitating. "Power isn't always loud," he said finally. "Sometimes it sits in the corner and takes notes until the room finally has to listen." I didn't confront Mordecai that week. I know some people would have. I kept living in that house, kept making his coffee, kept nursing Iris at 2 a.m., while Winona quietly authenticated documents in Driscoll. Once he understood I wasn't going to let his warning die in a parking garage, agreed to speak to the SEC's referral division as a witness. I did not enjoy the waiting. I want to be honest about that too. There is a particular kind of exhaustion in loving someone in public while building the case that will end it in private. Mordecai noticed nothing. That told me something too, about how little he'd ever needed to look at me closely to believe I was exactly where he'd left me. The board meeting where everything would come apart was scheduled for a Thursday 3 weeks out. Voss Global's quarterly review, the kind of routine meeting Mordecai had never once thought to worry about. I sat with that date circled quietly in the back of my planner and kept my face very still. The boardroom on the 40th floor had a view of the harbor that Mordecai's grandfather had insisted on. Back when the company still shipped freight and not just money. I had been in that room exactly twice before, both times as Mordecai's wife, Seated along the wall with the other spouses while the men discussed numbers I understood better than most of them. This time I sat at the table. Winona sat beside me. Driscoll Hale sat 2 seats down. His hands folded very still in front of him. Umbriel arrived last, in pearls the way she arrived at everything. She saw me at the table and her expression flickered, just once, before it resettled into something practiced. I wasn't aware the review included outside counsel, she said, looking at Winona. Ms. Voss has standing as a shareholder through the Callaway Meridian Holdings, Winona said, and as a party to the matters on today's agenda. Mordecai looked at me for the first time that morning like he was seeing something he hadn't accounted for. Driscoll opened with the amended 8K. Then Winona presented the authentication report on the Meridian Point valuation, the non-existent licensing of the appraisal firm, the backdated signature pages. I watched Mordecai's face while she spoke, watched him search each page for a mistake, a place the story would fall apart. It didn't. This is absurd, Umbriel said. My son would never. The signature on page 14 is his, Winona said, sliding it across the table. Dated 4 months before the acquisition closed, which is not possible, since the acquisition target wasn't identified until 6 weeks after that date. The room went quiet enough that I could hear the harbor traffic through the glass. Then Winona placed the second folder on the table. The Foundation's Donor Relations Disbursements. Sabrina Lockhart's name on 11 line items totaling just under $300,000. For consulting work the Foundation's own director confirmed, under subpoena the week before, had never been performed. Umbriel's hand found the pearls at her throat. That's family business, she said. That has nothing to do with this board. It has everything to do with fiduciary duty, Winona said. Which is why the SEC's referral division has already received a copy. Mordecai stood up so fast his chair rolled back into the window ledge. You went to the SEC? I looked at him, and for a moment I let myself remember him in that hospital waiting room, holding my hand without a word while my father died down the hall. That man had existed. He just hadn't been the one making these decisions. I didn't go to the SEC, Mordecai, I said, my voice no louder than it needed to be. Driscoll did 18 months ago and nobody listened. I just made sure someone finally did. Driscoll didn't look up from his hands, but I saw something in his shoulders loosen, like a weight he'd been carrying alone for a year and a half had finally been set down somewhere it could be shared. You planned this, Mordecai said. No, I said. You planned this the day you backdated a signature and paid your girlfriend out of a children's foundation. I only wrote it down. Umbriel stood, her chair scraping against the floor. You will regret this. You have no idea what it costs to lose a company like this one. I know exactly what it costs, I said quietly. My father lost his health keeping other people's numbers honest for 31 years, and never made a tenth of what this company spends on a single gala. I know precisely what honesty costs. I paid attention to the price the whole time. The board voted to place Mordecai on immediate administrative leave, pending the SEC's investigation. 2 independent directors resigned within the hour, citing concerns raised in the referral report. Umbriel's advisory role, ceremonial but still salaried, was suspended the same afternoon. I did not smile when the vote was read. I did not look at Mordecai to see how he was taking it. I closed my folder, the same way Winona had taught me to close every file, cleanly, without theatrics, and I asked to be excused to pick up my daughter from her grandmother's. Outside, the March air was sharp enough to clear my head. I sat in my car for a long moment before starting the engine, my father's pen in the cup holder where I'd carried it that morning without quite deciding to. The numbers don't lie, he used to say. Only people do. I had let the numbers speak for themselves. That was enough. The SEC investigation took the better part of a year to resolve. Mordecai was never charged criminally. The backdated appraisal was ruled a civil securities violation rather than fraud requiring prosecution. But he paid a settlement that emptied most of what remained of his personal accounts, once the company's restructuring absorbed the rest. Voss Global survived, smaller and cleaner. Under an interim CEO the board brought in from outside the family for the first time in 3 generations. Umbriel never came back from the suspension. She sold the mansion 18 months later, quietly, through a broker who kept her name out of the listing. I heard she moved into a condominium near Hilton Head. I don't know if that's true. I stopped keeping records on people once they stopped being part of my life. Sabrina Lockhart was never criminally charged either, but the foundation's board barred her permanently, and the story followed her enough that the consulting contracts stopped coming. I didn't take satisfaction in that. I want to be honest about that too. There's no dignity in watching someone else's fall, even when they built the ladder themselves. Driscoll Hale kept his job. The new board made a point of it, publicly, as a signal to anyone else inside the company who might one day need to tell an uncomfortable truth and wonder if it was worth the cost. He sent Iris a savings bond on her first birthday, tucked inside a card that just said, "Your mother listens to the right things. Tell her thank you." Mordecai sees Iris every other weekend, through a custody arrangement Winona helped draft, calm and specific, the kind of document my father would have approved of. He is careful with her in a way he was never careful with the truth. I let that be enough for her sake, without pretending it settles anything between us. He came to the house once, about 8 months after the board meeting, to drop off a birthday gift for Iris. A small wooden music box, the kind with a dancer that turns when you lift the lid. He remembered me admiring one like it in an antique shop years before we were married, before Voss Global, before any of it. "I'm sorry," he said at the gate. No excuse folded into it, no request for anything back. I didn't forgive him that day. I'm not sure I have even now. But I told him I hoped he became someone Iris could be proud of, and I meant it, because hoping that costs me nothing and might cost him everything if he takes it seriously. I started a small scholarship 2 years later through the fund for kids from families like mine. First-generation accountants and auditors who couldn't afford the CPA exam fees on their own. I named it after my father. The Ronan Calloway Fund for Honest Numbers. The first class had 6 students in it. Last spring it had 31, one for every year he spent keeping other people's books straight. I still keep his pen on my desk, in the leather case Mordecai gave me during the 2 months I let myself believe things were fine. I never took it out of that case, even after everything. Some gifts survive the person who gave them. Here is the thing I wish someone had told me before any of this started. Love does not require you to lay down your own measurements. You are allowed to check. You are allowed to measure twice, even when you want to believe. Especially when you want to believe. Because love that cannot survive a second measurement is not love. It is a loan you were never going to get back. My father used to say the numbers don't lie, only people do. I understand now that he wasn't just talking about spreadsheets. He was talking about attention, about the difference between loving someone and watching them closely enough to know when love was being used against you. I write things down now, out of habit more than fear. Iris is 4. She likes to sit at my desk and scribble in the margins of my legal pads while I work, and I let her because I want her to grow up believing that paying attention is a form of love, not a betrayal of it. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and telling the truth, knowing the truth would cost you everything familiar? Tell me which one you chose and whether you'd choose it again.